Psychology in Seattle.
So, Humberto, have you seen Mindhunter Season 1 and Season 2?
I've seen all of Season 1 and I've seen most of Season 2. I watched the first 8.5 episodes.
Oh, is it 9 episodes?
Yeah, I'm missing 1.5 episodes.
Interesting. Okay. So, well, let's talk about it because a lot of people are asking us to talk about it. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Humberto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I work at Star Tours down in Disneyland.
Who is your favorite serial killer presented in the show?
Well, of the ones I've seen, I actually was, I think Kemper, is that his last name?
Mm-hmm.
Kemper's just definitely fascinating. But I'm sort of going to excuse myself from that one because he was already really fascinating in the first season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Season 2. I actually really thought that the whole interaction with Manson was fascinating. I was not expecting it to go that way. He's not even a serial killer. And yet, and then I guess I didn't realize that he was going to be so like, hey man, it wasn't me, you know? So that was really intriguing. And then as well as the follow-up with the Tex dude. I really, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is, but I think it is from my memory of different interviews that they've done with Charles Manson. I think that the reason why Manson was like that was because he wanted people to understand that he was that good, he was that charismatic. I think that was part of his thing, was that he didn't necessarily get off on the idea that he could kill people, because he wasn't the sort of person who was wanting to kill someone. Mm-hmm. What he did want to do is control people, because supplied his narcissism.
Right.
That he could, one, get a bunch of dropout teenagers to hang out with him, then that he could get them to listen to him play music, then that they could listen to him spout about different political beliefs.
And race war.
Well, but previous to that, it was about love and about,
right.
And he kind of talks about that, about like, let go of your mind. Like in the Mindhunter Season 2, the scene with Charles Manson was done so well because there are certain elements to his spouting that he did in the show and probably in prison, and also obviously when he had his cult, that rings true.
Yeah.
Stuff that on some level is very hippie philosophy, but kind of resonates with me. Right. Like, free your mind, man. Like, you're just a fake. You're just sitting there in your button-up suit trying to act like you're important, but you're not important. You're a joke, just like everyone else. I'm a joke. Right. Everyone's a joke. Why are you playing this game? Like,
time's not a thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the stonerisms, but there's some of it that I absolutely resonate with. Sure. You know, like when I was a teenager and first came upon philosophy like this, I really took to it and still do. Like, there's a lot of this that just really appeals to me, and so the scene with Manson was interesting in that way, because I was personally like, okay, Charles Manson, let me join your stupid cult. You know, I like this philosophy.
Well, and the fact that usually Holden's able to kind of break into most of the people he ends up talking to, most of the serial killers he ends up talking to, he ends up breaking into their little world somehow. And he was like thwarted at the gates with Manson. Like, basically, Manson was completely unfazed.
Yeah. And
there was nowhere to go. It was like, oh. At least, I don't know if do they talk to him again in the...
No.
Okay. So, yeah. And it was really interesting what Kemper said. Because what's Holden's, the main guy, the main cop?
Tench.
Tench says, like, well, you know, we're going to talk to Manson or whatever. And Kemper's like, oh, yeah, okay, well, the hype machine or whatever. If you really want to know what's up, talk to Tex. And then Tench goes, well, yeah, Tex, I mean, just a puppet. And then Kemper goes, oh, if you say so. And it's like really insightful.
Well, so that actually was part of the show that I was like, huh? Like, what are they saying? Because on one level, I guess Kemper and Manson were saying that it was all Tex's doing, that he was the sadistic psychopath.
Which, yeah.
But then we get to Tex, and Tex is like, no, you don't understand the power that Manson had over us and how persuasive he was. Essentially, is what Tex is saying, and he gives this impression like he was just this clean-cut, very influenceable white kid, from the suburbs. What do you think about that?
The sense I get, and of course, it's just a show, and who knows if this was said or whatever, but I'm going to give Kemper's intellect the benefit of the doubt here, because the sense I got was, well, wait a minute. Okay, so he was on drugs, and he certainly bought into generally the BS from Manson, but he still he still was the main leader of those murders, and definitely was aggressively murdering those people. B, he says himself, he's like, well, I don't know if I would have, I hope I wouldn't have murdered anyone, but I've thought about it, everyone has, or whatever. It's like, wait, what? And then he's like, and then the other thing is, he kind of would fit the profile in many other ways, because he's a young white male with, obviously he's not following the normal path of things. He did join this cult, and then the fact that he was on tons of drugs, well, a lot of these folk end up having problems with alcohol or with drugs or both or whatever. So that's not like rules him out. So I it gave me a different perspective. Like, sure, clearly Manson was mentally manipulating a lot of these people, but there's no power on earth that can mentally manipulate me to go and murder some people. So it's like there are several steps removed to then also being able to do that.
Well, I always take issue with statements like that, because you don't know what you would do at the age of 19 or however old Tex was at the time.
Well, I mean, I do, because I was trying to be influenced to be reborn as a Christian by the reborn Christian folk. And I was like, no, thanks, I'm cool. So but
that's a different scenario. Like, imagine you're a disaffected youth.
Yeah.
The culture at the time is such that no one trusts the police. No one trusts the adults. There are actual things happening that look like maybe there is a revolution in the United States. Maybe there will be an overthrowing of the government. I mean, it was a viable perspective. Just like when we were growing up, it was viable to think that we were all going to die from a nuclear holocaust.
But everyone felt that way, and everyone was on drugs, and most people didn't brutally murder.
No. But I'm giving you the background of like the influences that slowly lead a impressionable. Now, maybe you wouldn't have done it. I can never know that, obviously.
Yeah.
But the notion of that people look at stories like this and go like, well, obviously something must be wrong with Tex, because if I was there or normal people were there, they wouldn't have done that. And it's possible, of course, we'll never know, because we have no way of actually opening up people's minds and like measuring things. But time and time again, things like this happen in multiple different venues, not only obviously in these rare situations of murder, but in situations where you find yourself in an abusive relationship for 3 years, and 5 years later, you're looking back at it and you're like, how did I even get into that? I don't feel like I'm that kind of person. Or you find yourself in a situation at work where you have a boss who is extremely abusive to you, and you put up with a lot of shit. And then 10 years later, you look back and you're like, why did I put up with that shit? I was raised well enough to know to push back. I'm the sort of person that doesn't put up with shit like that. Why did I put up with shit like that? And the answer is because we're not individuals. We're not like walking around in complete isolation of our own minds. We are absolutely like at least half affected by the system that we're in.
Yeah, but don't mistake, like, because I'm certainly not saying, oh, no, Tex is evil. That's what I'm saying. Clearly, by the point that Tex got involved with Manson, his neural pathways had been set in such a way that he would be likely to go along with such stories.
Maybe
that he'd be likely to wanna go along with the drugs, and then that he would be likely to freaking brutally murder these people.
Right.
And sure, he's a product of his environment, as are all the serial killers.
Right. So that I agree with. That someone else, if he had Manson had tasked one of the other cult members with leading one of those charges, I think Squeaky Fromm might have been up for it, but someone else might have been like, would have done it differently, or would have somehow sabotaged the mission or something. Yeah. Like maybe Tex, and it seems like likely that Tex, because there's other interviews, obviously Mindhunter isn't the only data we have that point towards Tex being quite a psychopathic sort of leaning person. But the question of, would Tex have murdered anyone if he never met Manson? I believe no, because most people don't murder people. Most psychopaths don't murder people. Right. And so I believe when I saw the Mindhunter show, what I liked about it is that they just sort of lay out the data. Ed Kemper thinks that Tex is a monster, or a secret monster on some level. Manson says, I'm not a monster at all. It was Tex. Tex says, I was confused and influenceable, and Manson absolutely intimated, at the very least, he built us up to this act, and it was I was manipulated. Me and all the other people were just manipulated by his extremely charismatic presentation, and I think all are true. But where I land on is Manson is an extremely influencing human being.
Oh yeah,
and for people, what I want people to understand is how when someone like Manson comes along that is extremely influencing and extremely charismatic, people will follow, and they will do things that they would never have done otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's happening today. Like, you could almost say that this podcast has that kind of power. Like, people like this podcast. If you're listening right now, you probably like this podcast. You probably are influenced by me and Humberto. I have that power.
Drink some tea right now.
Yeah. And if I said something that contradicted something that you thought out there, I've probably convinced you of things because for whatever reason, I'm like 3% Charles Manson in that I have that ability to like change people's minds. I don't think I've ever said that out loud before, even really thought it, but
you do look like him a lot.
Yeah. I'm a songwriter.
That's right.
So this is happening all the time. It's just that in these rare circumstances, it ends up doing extremely antisocial things. What I would hope is that I'm using my power, my charisma for pro-social means to actually help society. But, one could argue that I'm not. But the point is that we don't have to just look, a lot of times people go, oh, the Charles Manson story, this cult, this weird, like, exotic situation. No. These are happening all the time. Therapists, teachers, particular family members, people on the news, podcasters, actors. We are influenceable to an extreme degree. And when we recognize that, then we can actually kind of do something with it. We can actually say, okay, well, what charismatic people should we be following? What charismatic people should we not be following?
Right.
I am not an individual. I am a product of my environment. I am like just take, for instance, for me, I listen to podcasts. Who am I letting influence me? And do I want them to influence me? I've been listening to the Conan O'Brien podcast lately, and I find it delightful. And I liked Conan O'Brien before, but I really like him now because the podcast is really fun. And he just seems like a really great guy, Conan O'Brien. and I'm letting him influence me. And if I reflect on that, I think, I'm okay with that because the effect that he has on me is probably good. And so that's what I hope that people walk away with and when they learn about the Charles Manson story and they see it depicted in Mindhunter.
It's probably really difficult because most people don't practice that level of introspection as a rule. And of course,
and they think that they're an individual.
Well, and even if
who thinks individual thoughts and isn't influenceable.
Sure, but even if for some, let's say they did believe, well, I mean, I am a member of my community, my church, my thing, my stuff. You know, if you put the question, for example, let's say someone is a devout follower of our current president, and you said, do you think that might influence you when he talks or when he tweets or things like that? They might say, well, sure, but I mean, I agree with it. And I think that's the catch, is that and some people are so good that they might actually bring someone along that doesn't agree with them, right? But a lot of times, it's a game of inches. It's like, oh, that sounds reasonable. Like you were just saying, you hear Manson say something like, "Man, we're all just nothing." It's like, oh, well, actually, that sounds reasonable. And then the next inch is like, and love is important. Oh, well, that sounds reasonable. And here are these songs. Well, that sounds reasonable. And I mean, what is the problem with doing a little pot? Well, that sounds reasonable. And there's other ways to expand your mind. That sounds reasonable. And then 2 years later, let's practice yelling at this empty chair and insulting it because this is the pigs. And well, that sounds reasonable. And then more things sound reasonable.
If you want to see the full slippery slope that Humberto is depicting, watch Charlie Says, a movie that came out last year, directed by the woman who directed American Psycho. It is, to my knowledge, the best depiction of the cult of the Manson family and how it progressed and how it was really, because people have a lot of ideas in their head about the Manson family,
right?
And they're this crazed sex cult that wanted to kill everyone. And 99.999% of the time, it was a very loving group that had a lot of fun together and bonded together and did a lot of good things for each other and helped each other. They foraged for food. They supported each other. They made meals together. They ate together. They hung out together. It wasn't until later when Manson started to, I think, get my main sort of hypothesis or conceptualization of what turned just a regular dirty hippie commune into a killing cult was that Manson was so troubled and in need of so much narcissistic supply. And they kind of depict that in the TV show Mindhunter, but just how frantic he was.
Yeah.
He couldn't really sit still. And I think that as he went down this road, it was like in the beginning, I don't know if I've talked about this with you or on the podcast before, so excuse me if I have, but in the beginning, like I said, it was like, okay, can I get dirty hippie dropout kids to hang out with me?
Oh, there we go again. No, just kidding.
So it's like, oh, I got 3 hippies to hang out with me. That makes me feel like I'm a special person. Well, that wears off after a couple of weeks. Okay, well, now I need 5 more. Okay, I got that. I feel good for a couple of weeks. I can avoid my deep, dark abyss of in my soul because I was massively mistreated growing up. And then it's like, okay, now I need them to listen to me sing. Now I need them to move into a commune together. Now I need them to take their clothes off at command. Now I need them to have sex with me. Now I need them to have sex with each other. Now I need them to do that. Now I need them to listen to me. Well, eventually because every step of the way, it would give him a little bit of satisfaction, but that would wear off. And then he'd have to go higher and higher. And eventually he's like, well, what if I started convincing them to be violent?
Right.
Okay, what if I started to convince them that there's a war happening? Okay, what if I actually said, well, go out and kill people? And it wasn't until then, when his influence caused those kinds of behaviors, that's when the law got involved, and that's when it ended. But if he hadn't been caught, then I'm quite positive it just would have, escalated from there. Not because Manson wanted to kill people, but because he was a frantic, desperate need for narcissistic supply, and that's just where it head.
And he certainly, although I'm sure you're right that, well, at least the evidence doesn't show that he personally wanted to kill people with his own hands. He certainly didn't care. Like, he wasn't beat up about the murders.
Right. He didn't care. The other thing was that, and they show this in Charlie Says, and this is, a big part of the Manson story, is that if he had become a famous musician, if they had signed him and recorded him and put him on tour and sold his records, that would have also supplied his narcissism.
Yeah.
And in all likelihood, he never would have killed anybody.
Right.
Because he all he wanted was narcissistic supply.
Yeah.
I don't think he cared where it came from. And when it looked like he wasn't going to be a famous musician and he wasn't going to get that narcissistic supply, that's when he started going into a dark road. And he was also extremely vengeful of famous people for having rejected him to be in the music industry. Anyway, let's get back to Mindhunter. So, Rotten Tomatoes, what do you think it gets on Rotten
For season
Tomatoes?
2?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go, critics gave it 80%.
98.
98?
Yeah, audience.
Amazing. Audience, 90.
95.
Okay.
Extremely highly rated. Executive produced by David Fincher, Charlize Theron. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And others. For those who don't know, it's based on real events happening in the late 70s, early 80s. Season 1 is 1977 to 1979-ish, and season 2 is 1980. It's basically about the FBI slowly realizing that they need to figure out the psychological profiles of serial killers. They actually, during the show, they invent the term serial killer because serial killing was a relatively new phenomenon in the 70s, and the FBI are trying to figure out what to do about it, and they're failing, and they're thinking, okay, well, maybe if we start this department in the FBI that looks at behaviors and psychology, and behavioral science unit is what it's called, so that they can find them and stop them. And the show mainly focuses on 2 FBI agents, Holden and Tench, as they interview serial killers to try to figure out why the convicted serial killers did what they did, so they can catch the serial killers that are still at large.
Right.
So let's get into some of the psychology of this show. The first thing I want to talk about are Holden's panic attacks. What did you think about that whole thing?
I mean, I think it would be hard to imagine that anyone wouldn't have at least some lingering damaged effects from that experience that he went through in the end of season 1, because not only would it be extremely scary to be in a room unsupervised with some serial killer, but the serial killer in question physically is a mountain, and completely could overpower him easily, and all these things. So I wasn't surprised that caused him some severe panic, and I thought they started by depicting it well, but I do think that they kind of dropped the topic. It's like the first couple episodes it was a subject, and now maybe it comes up in the last episode or something, but there were many episodes where it just didn't kind of reoccur, and I was a little surprised by it because I thought well, he got over that quickly.
Yeah, actually, thinking back, I think that is true. So Holden has a panic attack at the end of season 1 when Kemper scares him, essentially, and he collapses in the hallway, and he thought he was having a heart attack, and he wakes up in the hospital. He's still panicking. This is the beginning of season 2. He's strapped down. They give him a sedative, seemingly. So this scene was interesting because panic attacks are not the sort of thing where you completely flip out like that, where you would need restraints.
Right.
So so that was so. I'll just say that the whole depiction of the panic attack, phenomenon or condition in Holden was both accurately depicted in the way that my industry back then wasn't the way it is today. Didn't know as much as they do today. So in some ways, there was a lot of really just bad treatment of panic.
Right.
Is my statement, and I would say that part of that is because it's accurate to depict that in the past they would have treated panic in a very bad way, very ineffective way, or very harsh way. But I also think that they might have gone a little too far, because it's just really common for Hollywood to depict mental health the way that they think it would look.
Right.
And the way that people think mental health looks is very dark and very harsh and upsetting.
For me, based on my own experience of it, The Sopranos did a great job depicting the panic attack aspect, because for Tony it would come in seemingly suddenly. Granted, you could see, I see, that might have triggered him and stuff, but in general, and it was recurring. It was fairly debilitating, but it was also not like, oh God, he's going into seizures. Oh, we got, like stuff like that. What I thought in this case is, initially I wasn't actually, because at the end of the first season, I wasn't thinking, oh, he's got a panic attack. I literally just thought, I guess I didn't have a label for it, but I was thinking, maybe PTSD or something, like, because it's such a stressful moment. But if it were
the way they depicted it at the end of season 1, it was like he had a psychotic break.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I would not. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, you just went through like some serious crazy stuff. But then if it were a panic attack, I was expecting, because based on my own experience of it, I had, after that first big one, I had probably like 2 months of recurring mini panic attacks, and it took me a while to get to be able to like feel them, sense them, and actually really like a couple years of me learning how to, I'm getting angry, okay, I'm fine, and then like doing little like body things to like short circuit it.
Body things?
Yeah, like, adjusting myself in a chair, taking a deep breath, or like just self-soothing, like, because it would come on and I would feel it. I'm like,
right.
And it's like this.
Yeah, what I think happened was the writers of season 1, they wanted to end the season on something
dramatic.
Yeah. And they, I think they really wanted to focus season 1 on Holden and his journey. The season 1 was all about Holden. Season 2 wasn't so much about Holden.
Right.
But season 1 was all about Holden. I think they wanted to show that. I think the writers were sitting around and they were thinking, okay, we want Holden to be very focused on his work and trying to figure out these serial killers, and he's slowly losing his mind as he enters the world of serial killers. This is a trope, you got to become one. If you want to know one, you got to become one. And I think that they wanted to see Holden have a consequence, have some kind of suffering from all of his, one-track mindedness in season 1. He wasn't a balanced character.
Right.
And I think that the writers wanted him to have some kind of break, some kind of mental episode. And they depicted something at the end. And I don't think they had a conceptualization of what it was.
That could very well be.
And then in between season 1 and 2, they're like, okay, well, now what do we write? And they're like, well, it'd be a pretty dumb show if Holden's in the hospital for all of season 2.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we're going to call it Panic, and we'll pay some attention to it episode 1 and 2, but then we'll just get back.
Then we'll drop it like a bad habit.
Right. Then we'll just get back to the regular kind of thing, and because we don't want to have to deal with Holden freaking out all the time.
Right.
And we'll have this air of like maybe it could happen because it'll raise the tension around Holden when he's hanging out with serial killers of like, is he going to have a panic attack? But we don't really want that to be the focus because that we just don't want to go in that direction. That's what I think happened. I don't think
That seems legit. I mean, like, that's kind of how it played out for me.
Right.
I didn't think about the fact that they probably didn't have a plan at the end. But yeah, that seems very likely.
So in season 1, we see the physician in the hospital. So first off, he's strapped down, which I thought was a little interesting. Again, possible, not likely, but I wasn't around. I wasn't in the field in 1980, so who knows? The physician comes in and says, "I could send you down the hall to look at ink blots, but in my opinion, you need to lower your stress." Again, possibly accurate for the time. I could see a physician saying that back then, particularly in certain areas of the country where psychoanalysis was the dominant form. But there were plenty of so ink blots is, especially back then, would have been mainly associated with like Jungian and sort of more arcane psychoanalytic practices. So I actually am trained in Rorschach ink blot.
Yeah, I like The Watchmen, but what does that have to do?
Ink blot analysis is, there is a science to it, and there is empirical evidence of certain things you can draw from what people see in these ink blots. It's pretty limited though, and there's much easier ways to get at that information. But anyway, there are a lot of other treatments for that, and I have a hard time believing that the physician hadn't heard of other things that were going on at the time, namely cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, REBT, etc.
It could be more of him being just like kind of a dick, like
the physician.
Yeah, just like looking down on psychiatry even.
Yeah, which wouldn't be unheard of.
Yeah.
He gives him benzos, he gives him Valium, and Valium absolutely can help. So this was a good prescription by the physician. Valium can help for sure. It can, absolutely just take away one's anxiety in the moment. But it can also be kind of a security blanket for some people. It's like, well, at least I know it's there. And then sometimes knowing that it's there will actually cause you not to have a panic attack.
Oh, interesting.
Or a placebo like that. It actually kind of happened when he has his second panic attack, when he's being yelled at by his former boss.
Yeah.
And he has that panic attack, and he takes the pill, and it almost seems like right away he starts to feel better. There's no way a benzo takes like half hour to kick in, or 15 minutes at the very least.
I see.
And so,
but his mind might have been like, okay, you're fine.
Yeah, I've got a benzo in my body. Everything's gonna be okay. Yeah. He gets out of the hospital, and Tench, his partner in the FBI, shames him. It's a very common response,
right? Even
today. Anyway. Then Dr. Wendy Carr, I believe her name is Carr, she sits down with him at the bar and asks him a bunch of questions. And this scene really bugged me. I mean, one, because Dr. Wendy is not, I don't think she's a clinical psychologist. I think she's a research professor.
Yeah, that's the impression we got.
Yeah. So the fact that she would know what to do. I mean, I have psychologist friends who don't know anything about clinical matters and wouldn't know the first thing about how to interview someone about panic attacks. So, but again, I could see Wendy. So bad behavior on Wendy's part, but as is typical in movies and TV. But I could see it happening. Ask a bunch of questions. We find out that Holden, this was his first and only panic attack. He said he felt like he was having a heart attack. He couldn't breathe. He didn't pass out. He had tunnel vision. And he said it was triggered by his visit with Kemper. And Holden said, Wendy's like, well, what do you mean? What did Kemper do? And Holden's like, he hugged me. And that's not an accurate depiction of what happened.
Right.
Now, we could see how a character like Holden might not be aware of like how to describe something.
And he definitely is, I don't know if socially awkward is the right description, but he doesn't communicate properly.
Yeah. What happened was Kemper physically threatened Holden.
Yeah. And again, as we're saying, it's not some random person physically threatening you. It's a multiple repeat murderer.
Yeah.
The size of a mountain.
Yeah.
Threatening your life knowing full well that if he wants to, that's the end of your story.
And he probably wants to. Right. And it's not unheard of. I mean, there are cases where convicted, incarcerated killers will kill people in situations like that. They'll get alone with someone. I mean, I could tell you this one story that this one guy told me that it was so gruesome that I don't even want to say it. I mean, it was.
But it happened something like that.
It would happen in a situation like that,
Yeah.
and man, I mean the whole anyway.
Yeah.
So then she goes on. Wendy says, and so at this point she seems very upset.
Yeah.
Which again is not unheard of, but just terrible approach to someone with panic.
Sure.
When someone has a panic attack, you don't want to be like, oh my God, we have to be extremely vigilant.
Right.
Like that's the direct.
That's the opposite.
The direct. You need to tell people with panic to be like, you're fine.
Right.
And tell yourself you're fine.
Right.
Nothing bad's gonna happen.
Right. Which, by the way, because that was the first thing that started helping me is when I went to the doctor the next day, and the doctor said, physically you're fine. I think you had a panic attack, and I think you might want to consider seeing a therapist. And I was like, well, okay, so it's like not physical. She's like, well, yeah, I mean, it is physical, but it's not like you're having a real heart attack or something. It's triggered by something, and you might. And so when I heard that, I was like, it already started down the road of helping me,
right.
Let alone when I started going to therapy and stuff. Which, by the way, the other thing that is interesting is that I thought was not accurate. But again, this is just based on my experience, so maybe that's not right. But what I mean is this. When I had my first panic attack, it wasn't because of something that I could directly point to in that moment. I was like, well, it's because, at the time I was watching the second Harry Potter movie. And I'm in the middle of the movie. I don't know what scene it was. It wasn't like, oh, it's when Hagrid yelled at Harry and said, you have no father. And then all of these memories started rushing. No, I'm just in the middle of the movie. And all of a sudden I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I had no idea why or what.
Yeah, that's common.
And so now piecing back the things, I was like, well, the night before I'd been heavily drinking, and I had done some reckless things. And in that whole time period, I had been doing very reckless things with money and other things. So yeah, sure, I could piece together a story about probably what led me to that moment, but it was not at all like, well, the serial killer hugged me, right? That's why I also didn't think when I saw it in the first season that it was a panic attack. I literally just thought of like a common reaction by any human to nearly dying.
Right, it's a traumatic reaction.
Yeah, a traumatic reaction.
Yeah, a terror reaction.
Yeah.
The second event where he was being yelled at by his former boss, then we could characterize that as potentially a panic attack.
Yeah.
I suffered from panic as well, and the thing that helped me was when I learned about panic attacks.
Yeah.
Well, I went to graduate school, and I was in my psychopathology class in my first or second quarter, and Ned Farley, a friend of mine now, was talking about panic, and we got to that chapter in the DSM, and he read it, and we were reviewing it, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I have. and 99% of my anxiety disappeared in that moment because the next time I had what I thought to be a panic attack, or the next time I had the precursors to a panic attack, I was like, well, it's just a panic attack.
Right.
It's no big deal.
Right.
So, but Wendy says, we have to emphasize, when we empathize with the psychopaths, we actually negate the self.
Yeah.
We deny our own beliefs about decency and humanity, and that can be very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
So again, very bad treatment. Not the thing you want to say in the midst of someone who is suffering from panic, and not really related.
And also that's like your opinion, man. Like you didn't do hundreds of years of research to come to that conclusion.
Right. I mean, to emphasize with psychopaths, you don't have to negate the self.
Right.
So, but again, I think the writers want that sort of element in there or something. And I could see someone saying that back then.
Oh, sure. And the other thing that, sadly, I actually had problems with the way they treated her character this whole season.
Really? We'll get to that in a bit.
Okay.
And then she sort of finishes with, I can keep an eye out, but you are the only person who can feel something coming on. And it's like, okay. And then she just kind of leaves it at that. I'll keep an eye on
It's
you.
super scary and dangerous, and I'll keep an eye, but you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah. She basically made his panic disorder like 100 times worse. And that because she doesn't follow it up. She doesn't say, so I can give you a benzo or a back rub or some calming words. She just lays out this thing like it's extreme. And again, I think the writers are thinking we want attention to be created around the possibility of him having a panic attack.
Right. Like they're more concerned about what this could do to the unit.
Right.
You know, because like even that was both him and her when they discuss it. It's like, well, we're going to have to kind of take turns watching him.
Right. So let me get to those quotes. So Wendy says during that conversation, panic attacks might not be brought on by anything real, but their effects are very real. This could have serious consequences for us and real physiological consequences for him. And it's like, no. One, yes, panic attacks might not be brought on by quote unquote anything real. But the effects are actually not real. That's the cornerstone of understanding panic is that it's brought on by something random. It feels like something is real, like you're going to die or you're going to go crazy or you're going to have a heart attack. But actually, you're not. Yeah. It is actually an illusion. It's your amygdala going crazy, convincing you of things that feel real but are not real. So Wendy is saying the direct opposite of the truths. Again, I could see a misguided psychologist saying something like this, maybe. Yeah,
well, I mean, so I could understand. It's like, well, look, what if he has a panic attack while he's driving? Like that could be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Or just the more practical thing about the interview is like, well, you know, if he's got a panic attack in the interview, it's gonna throw the interview off. But who cares? Like.
Right.
So you're already like up a losing hill on these interviews because who knows what you're going to get from them. Yeah. You're telling me that it's more important to you that your colleague might throw an interview because he's suffering from a trauma. Come on.
Yeah. And then she says it could have real physiological consequences for him. No, it can't. Again, if he's driving.
Yeah, or piloting a plane or something.
Yeah, then I suppose. But they give this impression that it could break his brain.
It's like, when he's juggling those knives, what if he had a panic attack in the middle of that?
Yeah. All right. Let's take a break. When we get back, let's talk about Holden's diagnosis.
Let's do it.
So, Berto, if Charles Manson were to convince everyone to become a patron of the podcast, what would he say?
Listen, man. What you got to understand is that there's no podcast, okay? You think you're hearing voices from these little speakers you put on your head, but that's not even real. That's not even a thing. What you need to do is give away all that you got because you're not keeping it. You're not holding on to it. So I want you to put a chair in the middle of the room, dump all your money, all your jewels, yell at them, insult them, and then give them away to Psychology in Seattle because there isn't even a Psychology in Seattle, man.
All right, Holden's diagnosis. So the internet says that Holden has autism, is on the autism spectrum. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, he's a little Aspergy. Is that a really offensive term, by the way? Did I just offend the internet?
No.
Okay. Meaning, I have had coworkers and friends. Now that but I'm thinking of this one coworker I had, who I was always so puzzled by because my interactions were so awkward with that person all the time, and it'd be like I try to like make a little joke, and it was like barely a reaction, and I just. Having a meeting, it was like playing a poker game. I'm like, what's going on here? And I get that sense from Holden. It's just like he doesn't really laugh at cues that other people are laughing at. He just kind of keeps it all very straight and not even by the book, just like stay on target. No, I just don't think he's the right suspect, blah, blah, blah.
Well, yeah. So for people like you who don't understand autism, I could see how you would think.
And I'm not saying autism. I'm just saying what I've heard of as Asperger's, where
Asperger's is mild autism.
Okay, where they don't read like social cues the same way maybe a normal curved person does.
Right. And again, this is not an insult.
Sure.
This is a statement of fact that you do not understand autism because it's extremely complicated.
Sure.
Most clinicians don't understand autism, let alone lay people. And you have what I would say to be a common misunderstanding of autism that leads to overgeneralization and over-application of the label to people and present in people in TV and movies that actually don't fit the profile at all. Holden is not autistic at all.
Yeah, but just to be clear, it's you people that have done this to us. Because before I knew, like seriously, before I knew any of these terms, I just thought, oh, that person's awkward. And then all of a sudden, around the mid-2000s, everyone started saying Asperger's this, Asperger's that. Oh, that person's got Asperger's, that person's got Asperger's.
I absolutely agree that clinicians started to over-apply it.
And by the way, and for me, like maybe I never made this hump over this hump because I still walk around, which I'm sure is also a misunderstanding, but I still walk around with an impression of autism as, well, no, that's like the really like in their head and might have some special skills kind of person.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I grew up with that too.
Yeah.
I mean, Rain Man was my first exposure to autism, and first and only, I suppose, until I was, 25 and actually started working with autistic people. The thing is you have to work with autistic people to really understand it, or you have to have a loved one who's autistic. And autism is, I'm not going to go into it, but anyway, Holden does not fit the criteria of someone even mildly autistic. I mean, you can make an argument, but if you did, you would be basically saying that like 20% of the population is autistic.
Sure.
And it's like, well, then it loses its meaning. If that's how you want to define it.
Right.
Holden, he functions fine.
Yeah.
He processes his world fine.
Yep.
He's just really anal and like really dedicated to his job.
Oh, that's actually fair. Yeah.
And he's not particularly, and he does actually, there's a scene with Wendy when he's talking in the bar, and she says to him, because, she has this very intense look, like, you got to really make sure, and he's, he's handling it pretty well and under the circumstances. And then she says, like, and if you need to talk to anyone, I can be here to listen.
Yeah.
And then he says, thank you, Wendy, because I've actually wanted to talk with someone about this sort of thing. And then Wendy instantly starts staring at the bartendress.
Yeah.
And because she has a crush on her. And then Holden looks up and notices that Wendy isn't even paying attention to him.
Right.
And he has this little look like his feelings are hurt.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Holden, is a little stunted or a little distant at work is because people are distant. I mean, Tench treats him like shit.
Yeah.
So,
all right, you've convinced me. And now that I think about it, the main thing I was reacting to is that there are scenes where they purposely depict them as clueless.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's consistent with those other scenes that you're pointing to, because a different way to interpret some of those scenes is like, no, I mean, he's aware, he just doesn't give a shit. Meaning, an example is like when he's like, oh, no, the suspect is black, and everyone else, like Tench and stuff, is like, dude, like, don't you understand? Can you read the situation?
Yeah.
And then one way to interpret it is like, no, he can't because he's slightly autistic. The other way to interpret it is like, oh, he can. He just doesn't give a shit. He's a little bit of a dick in that sense.
Right. So one could say that was he's like 0.1% on the autism spectrum, in that he has a hard time navigating those waters that other FBI agents seem to pick up without being told specifically. So you could make that argument for sure. But I feel like why can't we just say that he just has a hard time picking up on things like that?
You sold me on it, because actually I have had coworkers that I think would fit your criteria a little better in that. So like at the Star Tours, right? Like some of them, they'll sit at their desk. I'll come up to them to have a conversation about something we need to do or change. First of all, they can't make eye contact. They just can't. Like, I can't get them to look at me in the eyes, number one. Number two, from the beginning of the conversation, it feels like they want the conversation to come to an end. Like they're not comfortable having a conversation. And the only time that I can, I think, like make a little bit of a connection is if I just let them, like if I ask about something that they're interested in and I sit there and listen, and it can be a rat hole because they can go on and on and on and on and on. So that type of personality, I've run into a few people over the years, like in my line of work, and maybe it goes along with parks and recreations, but I don't know what the right label is, but it's certainly, it feels like it's difficulty reacting, quote unquote, normally in social situations.
Yeah, and Asperger's or mild autism spectrum is a possibility. The thing is that autism is such a complicated, pervasive issue that you would have to really know. And the people out there, because there are people out there who listen to the podcast who are on the autism spectrum, I know that, and because they've told me, and they will, the way they describe their discovery that they had mild autism was piecing together dozens of experiences that repeat throughout their life. It wasn't just that they have a slight coldness in a meeting,
right?
Or they are very logical, or they don't like to follow society's rules. There's a lot of frustrations that happen to autistic, because autistic people are they're not typical neurologically, and so they bump up against typicals. And there's all these sort of culture clashes a lot of times, and throughout their life they're just like, why am I always experiencing this? And then we'd have to know so much more about Holden that I just don't think they're presenting.
I think you're right. I'm imagining this situation where you're in a team meeting at work or something, and then afterwards you're like, dude, I think Johnson's got serious autism. Oh, how come? Well, you remember when I told that joke? Like, he barely laughed.
Right. It's essentially what people do now, which drives me crazy. I'm just like, how about he's just not very reactive.
Or your joke was terrible.
Or your joke was dumb. Or, he doesn't like you. Another internet diagnosis was high-functioning sociopath. What do you think about that one?
Huh? No.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's zero evidence that he's not empathetic, unless we just mean that he didn't demonstrate empathy to the commissioner in that one room meeting with the thing and the stuff. But I mean, clearly he's like extremely invested in trying to figure out what's going on with these murders of these kids. And then actually that whole scene was really telling, because when he first gets approached by when he's checking into the hotel, he mistakenly thinks, oh, I think she's into me.
Well, she, I think, purposely was trying.
Yeah. And you're right. She needed a way. But I wasn't sure how aware she was of the power she had of appearing that way, but maybe she was fully in control.
I thought she was hitting on him.
Well, yeah. So I think we all did, and definitely he did. What I don't know, again, is because you know how sometimes it's like, us guys, or certain types of us guys, were like, oh, she looked at me, I think she's hitting me. So they might have been doing like a little bit of a halfway, like, sure, she'll appear a little interested, but she didn't say anything like explicit, right? Like, anyways, my point though was, he's like, oh, okay, she's into me. But as soon as he realizes, oh wait, no, there's something else going on, he seamlessly transitioned into that mode, and then actually wanted to hear and try. And even though he was getting completely rejected by the other women, he was like, well, no, let me see if I can help. And that none of that shows any traces of lack of empathy or lack of caring or anything.
The opposite.
Yeah.
The only compelling factor in him doggedly pursuing this case of the Atlanta murders was because he cared.
Yeah.
He cared about those mothers. He cared about those kids.
Right.
There were so many other cases he could have been doing.
And he was doing himself no favors up the chain, so to speak,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And he also, because I really also think, like, it's not, you can't make a case that the guy's a narcissist. You know, it doesn't really seem like he's got any need for, like, well, but this will give me attention. He is not manipulating the situation to his advantage. He's not manipulating those people. He's not lying to anyone. He's not doing any of these things.
Right.
He's not dysfunctional. He's very competent and capable, organized, blah, blah. Like, no.
Yeah.
Forget it.
It's just this really annoying, stupid thing in the movies and TV productions and in internet discussions around these characters that just drives me crazy.
It's the Sherlock Holmes and House syndrome.
Exactly. Those two characters, House, Sherlock Holmes. There's one, the writers, directors, actors like to depict this pseudo psychopathy or pseudo autism. And then the internet loves to attribute, oh, that's a psychopath, and that's
functioning.
That's an autistic person, and they're both basically like feeding off each other.
Yeah.
The internet idiots are, influencing the writers because the writers want to appeal to them, and then and by internet idiots, I'm talking about like 80% of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just this weird phenomenon. So yeah, high functioning sociopath. One, stop saying sociopath because no clinical person or very few clinical people use the word sociopath. The internet loves to use that term. The media loves to use that term. I don't know where it came from. I kind of know where it came from because there's actually a history to the term, but the technical terms are antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. Psychopathy is a perfectly fine word, but for whatever, someone said to me, because I was asking this to, I think on the YouTube live thing, I'm not sure, like, why is everyone saying sociopath? And someone emailed and they said, well, because psychopath sounds harsh. Like the word psychopathy, it sounds very harsh, like they're going to be a psychopathic killer or something, which isn't true. And they said sociopath sounds softer.
I also think there was something in the 80s where this was getting permeated from some source because, look, remember, I grew up in a household with a psychiatrist, right? So you would have thought I would have had these terms like very delineated. But I distinctly remember having conversations about, well, and he had the DSM and he would show me and stuff. And clearly, like, the terms that were there and the ones that weren't there. But I still remember thinking that I had an understanding of, a psychotic has these psychotic breaks with things, visions that he sees that are not really there.
That's true.
A psychopath is like someone who really doesn't have these feelings and he'll just kill people, blah, blah, blah. Then a sociopath is sort of like that, but they're not really killers, but they're definitely going to try to take an advantage on society. And they're sort of like antisocial personality. I remember these things. Now, of course, I was young. Maybe I'm misremembering.
And that could have been told you, but that's actually false. It's complicated. We're talking about humans using words. Right.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, it seems like at some point, from whatever sources, these things started getting out there in the mainstream.
Right.
And I remember it in the 80s. And so I remember being in high school and in college and feeling like, oh yeah, that's a fact. These are facts.
Yeah.
A sociopath is this, a psychopath is this, a psychotic is this.
Yeah, and if we want to define it that way, that's fine.
Sure.
But that isn't how we define it in the field.
Right.
In the field, it's clear in the literature that sociopathy and psychopathy are essentially defined in the same way.
Right.
There were some delineations in the past, and it's funny because I always get these comments from like non-clinicians, non-research psychologists on the internet saying, "Well, sociopathy is this," and I'm just like, "Where did you get that?"
Which, to your point, like, so fine, let's just make up a non-clinical term for something that we want to describe.
But we don't need it, is the thing. Like, psychopathy, as we define it, is perfectly fine.
Sure.
There are spectrums. There's a spectrum of psychopathy. There's different presentations. The vast majority of psychopaths don't kill anybody.
Murderers, right.
So, because most people don't kill people. So, and you have psychotic, and which is actually a break from reality and delusional. And psychopath sounds like psychotic, but we understand that it's not the same word.
So would you say, like, because now, based on all the understanding I've had through the years we've been doing this and things like that, to me, a Tony Soprano is someone we could have a conversation about psychopathy.
Yeah.
Because, he is dysfunctional, even though he runs a thing. He's very dysfunctional. He's got very, he's compulsive, impulsive. He is clearly okay with people suffering, like lies for a living, constantly, all these things. But Holden, none of this. So I think we can conclusively say, no.
Yeah.
Get it out of here.
Let's go into another psychological topic, sexual sadism. So, which is different than psychopathy. And I want people to understand that. Like, being a psychopath, in essence, means that you don't necessarily care about other people the way that most people do. It means that you can care a little bit about other people, but it means that you don't care as much. It also means that when other people are suffering, it doesn't affect you the way that it would affect other people. If someone is crying or they're in pain or they're sad, to a psychopathic person, it just affects them less. It's not necessarily that the psychopath likes it, because that's a different thing. That's what we call sadism. Yeah. When someone likes someone else suffering and they try to make other people suffer, that's sadism.
And you can have combinations of these things.
You can be a psychopathic sadist, and you can be a psychopathic sexual sadist. There's various different roads to rape and sexual assault and rape murders. One can be just the desire for power. Another can be that you actually get your rocks off by actually doing such a thing, and that's called sexual sadism. And in this show, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I finally understand sexual sadism for the first time in my life because of something that they wrote in for Ed Kemper to say. And I know this sounds like extreme to people out there, maybe to you, Humberto, it might be kind of like, well, no, duh. But I'm sure this crossed my mind before, but I don't think it ever really sunk in.
Which one was it?
Well, he says that it's all about dominance. And he explains it a little bit, but somehow like it was this aha moment for me. And here's my conceptualization of it. So we have an instinct. I'll hypothesize for dominance. We not necessarily like dominance, but we have an instinct for power / dominance. We want to feel like we're powerful. You play with a young kid. I always look to young kids because they're more pure than adults are, and they act on instinct more than adults do, right? So a 1-year-old child will get off on dominance and power. Now we don't frame it that way, but the 1-year-old wants to throw the ball or wants to knock their cereal off of the table,
right?
Or wants to scream as loud as they can and make everyone in the room look at them.
Yeah,
like kids love that power, and whenever they can get it, they try to assert it because it gets people off. It motivates.
Right.
It's like, I know I'm not supposed to push these blocks off the table, but I can't resist it.
Right.
It's they magically end up back on the table anyway.
Yeah.
So this is going to be fun. It's going to make a big noise. Yeah. And yes.
And I'm a master of my domain.
I'm a master of or with other human beings. Like I might be able to grab their hair and yank the kid, or there could be a kid next to me and I might push them down.
Right.
Now, to a infant or a toddler, you just look at it as cute play. But when you look at it in a more scientific way or through a certain lens, it's a human being getting
right.
pleasure from dominating their world and other human beings. Even other things like once they get a little older, they're like 3 years old, and you're playing like a boxing match or something, and she punches you in the face, and it's very light, and you go, oh, and you fall over, and the kid and the 3-year-old's like giddy.
Oh yeah,
like, oh my God, Daddy, get up, it's fine.
Absolutely. And losing is very difficult for a child.
Right.
It's like, why am I not the number one winner on every situation.
Right. So 3-year-olds are walking psychopaths,
Yeah.
walking sadists on some level. But over time, through our interaction with, healthy parenting and healthy environment, we, as Freud said, we develop a superego and our ability to modulate that impulse. Mm-hmm. We have an impulse to dominance. We have an impulse to harm other people at times, to assert that power. But, we learn like, well, you can't do it that way. You have to assert your dominance in other kinds of ways. Like, you try to do really good at your job. You're dominant over your job.
In some general way, it's like you learn that there are rules and that you can actually be dominant if you try hard enough within those rules, but that in general, you probably should stay within the rules because otherwise it's not right. It's not good. It's not good for you. It's not good for society, things like that.
Right. There's balance.
Yeah.
You and I talking right now, there's two people talking. Each of us are want to dominate the conversation.
No, I want to.
But we also understand that wouldn't make good content and wouldn't make for a good friendship and wouldn't feel good in the end. But there's an impulse in us to like, I want this to be all about me. You know what I mean? Now, sexual sadism, we develop later in life when we start to, or sexual dominance, I should say, we develop later in life. And a lot of people have this. I would venture to say everyone has some version of sexual dominance that gets them off. Whether they actually express it or not is dependent on their life. But, from more obvious things like BDSM or spanking or something, but even just like sweaty vanilla sex, like,
ooh, that sounds
like, making your partner orgasm is a dominance that most people enjoy. Mm-hmm. Now, you might not frame it as dominance, but it is a form of dominance. You're making someone else do something,
right? And
you are in control,
right?
That sense of control. Now, you might not consciously be like, "Ooh, I'm in control," but you are, and a lot of people will explicitly talk about that. They'll be like, I like being in the driver's seat, and I like making that my partner have an orgasm.
Right.
Or riding your partner, that idea of dominance and, regardless of gender, it's like I'm riding on top.
And there's a lot of language in our culture that's not technically violent, but it is about dominance, right? Things like, oh, I'm going to do such and such so hard. Or like, oh, and like there are terms that actually, if you took them literally, are like ridiculously sexually sadistic. Like, I'm going to F your brains out kind of thing, like things like that. What is that? Like, you're literally going to do this? Like,
right. Yeah. When people are trying to be hot talk, they don't say, I want to very softly lay down with you and have some sensual pleasure. No one does that. They're like, I'm gonna take my C and I'm gonna put it in your P.
Wait, because I'm usually like, I will put my hands along some of your skin, and it will be a motion that I make that you will feel.
Yeah. Or talking dirty, like take it, suck it,
yeah.
Or even play like
you're getting me a little worked up here.
You're a dirty slut,
Wait, is this still the podcast?
Or people saying like, I'm so hard for you, or I'm so wet for you.
Or like, pull my hair. Or when people are like, bash that guitar on my head, and like, and then you're like, hey, throw me over the cliff, stuff like that.
Throw me over the cliff. Make me watch bad movies. So this, when people really reflect on it, now some people are like, well, yeah, I'm all about the spanking and the BDSM, but other people are like, no, I'm not into BDSM. But again, if people out there, if you really think about it, I'm positive there are things that you've engaged in or would like to engage in.
Well, even if they're into BDSM, I'm sure there's ranges, but I have met people that are generally into it, but it's like there are still rules. They don't end up in the hospital. There are constraints. It's like, sure, you can slap my ass, all day long if you'd like, but at the same time, I want my limbs intact. I want my eyesight.
Yeah. So this is the act of sexually sadistic behavior. You're taking pleasure in dominance or even harming other people, but it's within a healthy, consensual relationship. And people really like that. It feels good, not only to be the dominant, but also to be dominated. And so it seems like we have a instinct for dominance.
Right.
In general, we have also an instinct for dominance in sex. Mm-hmm. And when something goes wrong in your development, physiologically, neurologically, environmentally, developmentally, then it's a slight change. One dial is just ratcheted up a little bit. Another dial is ratcheted down a little bit. And now you have someone who gets off on raping people.
Right.
Now, again, just to bring it back to normalcy, something like half of human beings, more women than men, fantasize about rape, either raping or being raped. And so clearly it's normal to fantasize about dominating or about being dominated. It's
look, I actually, when I'm having sex, I like the partner to call me Tennille.
Because Captain?
Yeah, so I can call him Captain.
That was a long climb for a short fall. So but in our society, we're just like, well, there's all the normal people who don't rape, and everyone's fine, and we have regular sex, everything's normal. Without any dominance play, because that's freaky shit. And then there's this vast chasm between that normalcy and people who actually get pleasure from actually harming other people.
It's telling that our number one common position is called missionary style. Think of the horror of the naming. Like, that's just so bad.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Colonial style, they should call it. Imperialist style.
How's your father style? I mean, like, what the heck, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so there's things get ratcheted up a little bit, things get ratcheted down a little bit on your personality, and now you actually get off on people actually suffering non-consensually. Again, people fantasize about non-consensual sex as well, and so it's a variation on a normal expression of human sexuality that gets changed just slightly. And I don't know why Kemper's statement that it's all about dominance, sexual, because it was such a foreign thing to me. Because I really just, it's like, how could someone do that to another human being? Like, what would possess someone to do it and then actually like it? Like, it's the direct opposite of what I would think people would be turned on by. And when Kemper said that, it all came crystal clear to me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm sitting there thinking about how, for me, my experience was of being dominated when I was 5. I've talked about in the podcast before that I experienced some sexual abuse when I was 5, and I was not in control. I was not dominant. It was my babysitter was dominant. So in my adult life, the two things that occurred to me. One is the thought of me having sex while someone is asking me to stop or crying is not only unappealing, it's physically impossible for me to imagine being turned on. Like, I couldn't physically perform in those conditions. Number one. Number two, but I kind of go maybe a little on the other extreme, which is that a lot of times I've subsumed my own desire or pleasure because I might slip into that role of like, oh yeah, right, I'm just here for the other person because that was my first encounter with it, right? So I
think you mean assumed that role.
Right? I subsumed as in I drop into that. But honestly, so I think that makes it, I don't know, triply or tenfoldly as hard for me to relate to wanting the feeling of painful, traumatic dominance over someone.
Right. It's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
But when we see the healthy side, we understand it. Like most of us can understand the impulse to want to harm another human being. Like when someone cuts you off in the freeway.
Right.
Most people have had an impulse to yell at them, to flip them off, to maybe even, ram their car. Like there's an impulse there. Someone dumps you after 10 years in a very harsh way. It's not abnormal to have an impulse or a fantasy or a intrusive thought of, I'm going to burn their house down, or I'm going to slash their tires,
right,
or I'm going to run them over with a car. We have those thoughts that pop into our head.
Or lick their peanut butter or something. Or a politician that really bothers you. And you're just like, if there was a way that we could get rid of that person, or I hope they have a heart attack and die. Right.
So it's not unusual to have those kinds of thoughts, but and most of us either hide them or we're just like, well, that's normal. But it shouldn't be that hard to imagine the leap between that and actually doing it. We shouldn't look at these people as like this aberrant, and that's why I will often debate with you about this, because you want to categorize these killers, like the mass killers of today, or other people that we can look at, as being, there's something diagnosable about. There must be something wrong with these people. And what I'm saying is that there's a leap, but it's not as far as we commonly talk about it, between normal fantasy and impulse and normal aggression and the aggression that we see in the sorts of horrific kinds of behaviors.
So I totally don't disagree with you that these are in matter of miles, but I would argue that all of our humanity, all of our experience is a matter of inches, meaning the difference between you and a top tier Olympic athlete in human terms is huge in that sense, but like you're almost the same exact pile of mass. You know what I mean?
Why do you have to use the word pile?
Sorry.
Couldn't you?
Beautiful sculpture of mass.
I mean, you're looking at me from across.
Sorry.
You're a pile of mass.
You're a pile of mass. Well, I'll use myself. Like, what separates me from a successful Hollywood actor? Like, I'm better looking, I'm more charming, I'm a better actor, I have done more movies, I am more rich and wealthy and famous than them. So why am I doing Just kidding. But like the point is that it is really only a little tweak here or there that separates most humans from other humans.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you.
And that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
The difference not me and Brad Pitt, but say Brad Pitt and someone who's very good looking and is also a good actor.
Right.
And has abs.
Right.
And what's the difference between those two people?
Right.
And the thousands of others of Brad Pitt-like people
like
out there.
Me, like all of us.
That could have had, I just had a...
What are you laughing about?
I just had a vision of your abs being somewhere else on your body or something. I don't know.
My abs being, wait, what?
You're a pile of mass.
I'm a pile of mass. My ass abs.
By the way, just a total side note, because I'm thinking of a pile of mass. Remember Chet from Weird Science?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A pile of mass.
So side note, we have a new vice president at my university, and his name's Chet.
Oh, okay.
And I was at a staff meeting with all the faculty, and I said, I can't get over the fact that every time I hear that vice president's name, I think of Chet from Weird Science, Bill Paxton's character, and like everyone is like, huh?
Oh, no one knows what you're talking about?
Because they're all young now.
Oh.
All the professors, or they're young compared to me.
Right.
Like I used to be,
yep.
I was in my 30s, and everyone was in their 60s. So if I brought up Chet then, they wouldn't have known it. And now I'm 48, and everyone is in their 20s and 30s. And and not a single person knew what I was talking about. One person, I think one person's generally my my agent. I said, come on, Jill, like, surely you know what I'm talking about. She's like, I've never seen Weird Science.
Oh, no.
I'm like, how have you never seen Weird Science?
Oh, no. No, I mean, this happens to me all the time now. It is super sad. I'll be at work. We just got done with a set of people, just took the ride and stuff. And I make a joke and I make a reference. And like the other day, I was making a reference to the Brady Bunch. Silence of the Lambs. Like, I'm like, what do you... No one knows what I'm talking about? What is that? Well, no, the Brady Bunch. Like... You didn't grow up watching the... No, I've never heard of the Brady Bunch.
Or when they do references, now we're just, old man.
Old man. They won't get off my lawn.
Shakes fist at millennial clouds. Is they'll have a reference like Saved by the Bell or, like Fresh Prince. Like maybe you're of that generation, but I was too old to watch.
I do know those references.
Okay, so maybe I'm talking...
But they might do like an iCarly reference.
Okay.
Are you aware of iCarly?
Or, yeah, Hannah Montana or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Reddit and the internet is mostly younger people than us. And the references that they make sometimes, I'm just like...
Dude, it's tough.
Wah, wah. So the show gives two impressions, Mindhunter. One, that Holden and the team are figuring out who these people are. That's their whole purpose, right? And they seem to be like developing conceptualizations. In this season, they seem to be talking explicitly about like, okay, this is a blitz killer. This is an organized killer. This is someone who's out to get attention. This is a sexual sadist. This is someone who just acts because they want a revenge. There's different... They kind of talk about that a little bit. So they give the impression that these people who are studying this are actually figuring out who these people are and what makes them tick. The other impression that they give on the show is that they have no idea who these people are, and they're just throwing darts at a wall in the dark.
Right.
And that whenever they figure out, quote unquote, what makes these people tick, they find an exception, and then they find another exception, and then they keep finding all these other... Because in season 2, you had that African American guy,
right,
who I think has a low IQ,
right,
and doesn't really know why he's doing. He just seemed like he was just kind of like, I don't know.
Does not fit the profile.
Yeah, and then you had the.
But to be fair, it did fit many of Holden's profile intuitions.
Of what? That he was going to be a black guy.
Well, not only that, it was, first of all, he was right that it was one person, and for us watching
I'm talking about the other black guy that was actually in prison.
Oh, okay.
When he was talking, they were talking with him.
Yeah. Now I remember what you're talking about.
And he's just they're like, why did you do that? And he's just like, I don't know. She was a local girl.
Yeah.
And then they talked to the racist white guy who also had a low IQ. Actually looked him up, and he had a low IQ of about 70, which is like Forrest Gump IQ level. And they, the
guy that was like, I'm smart, like that guy. Yeah.
I can speak six.
I can spell and speak and
yeah. And so with him, it was like, well, why was he killing? And then the son of Sam, and then the Charles Manson. Like they're really different, and so either the writers are doing what I wish they would do, which is to show that it's really hard to conceptualize this broad range of individuals, and thus really hard to prevent these things from happening because there's too many profiles and they're not specific enough. You know what I mean?
Right. And this gets to some of what annoyed me about the psychiatrist character. Is she a psychiatrist? No, the
psychologist.
The psychologist character. Because I was hoping we were going to see more of her developing her field in the process, meaning scenes with her explaining, okay, I've looked at the latest interviews and the latest evidence, and I think there is now these new realizations, like these patterns. And so I before we thought there were 3 groupings, there's 5 groupings now, and stuff like that.
Like a TED Talk.
Like a TED Talk. Like she's, as much as Holden is developing his kind of FBI intuition and police tactics along with Trench and stuff like that, she's developing the field of psychology around this stuff. And unfortunately, they spent the whole season with her relationship and fine, and then she's a lesbian, and that's difficult.
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
So Actually, let's go to that now.
Okay.
So season 2 highlights marginalization quite a bit.
Yeah.
Much more so than season 1 did. Homophobia, being gay, being lesbian, is something that is portrayed in this show. Wendy, the doctor, she's gay. She's closeted. And I thought, well, what'd you think about that whole thing?
Well, as far as from that angle, I thought it was an interesting path. You know, they certainly did a good job showing how difficult it would be, how accosted she would be by males, just not even having a thought that she might not be into them and stuff like that. How it would be incredibly awkward for her to, you know, present herself professionally and at the same time say that she was a lesbian. The super awkward thing where she uses the confession of that she is a lesbian as part of the interview, but then has to pretend that of course she just was making it up. And all of that I thought was great. The little dynamics between her saying, you know, not wanting to admit that she wants the person to move in, all that stuff. I thought that was all great. I just felt like that's not the show I came to watch. And so I'm like, well, that's great. That's an interesting show about the 70s and lesbians, but where's the psychologist? And in a way, I hate to say it, but in a way I'm like, oh, I see. Okay. Just like her superiors, the writers have also relegated the female to a specific role in this show. She's there to be the female and also another token gay character, but not really to contribute to the meat of the matter, except for that one interview where she did good. And only, by the way, only because she was a lesbian.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry to be dumping.
No, I get it.
Body mass on
I could see that. I could see that as a viable criticism. It you know, it aligns with some very terrible movements in our society today.
Yep.
Like the anti-Star Wars people who are like, oh, you know, you got to have a woman and you got to make the men weak and the women always have to be right and the black people always have to be right. Like, it's a very silly argument that is made often, and you're essentially not aligning with that. You're coincidentally aligning with that point of view, because I don't think that's where you come from. But
I'm saying sort of the opposite, because if the folks that complain about the Star Wars movies, I would feel like they'd be okay with this because they're like, oh yeah, okay, well a little side reference to this stuff is fine. But
no,
what
I would
want,
imagine they wouldn't like it because of what you said. It's just like, I came to Mindhunter for Mindhunter, not to watch lesbians fall.
Well, but I would be much happier if she was instrumental to figuring this stuff out, to developing her field, to be an amazing psychologist, to contribute, all these things. Now, I realized that at the time she would have been blocked for real. And they tried to depict that with the head of the FBI going like, or whatever, the unit going, you know, why don't you stick to your psychology stuff? But I'm not saying don't make her a lesbian or whatever. I'm just saying, show me more of why she's on the unit. Like, don't just show me her personal life. Like, at least with Trench, they balanced it with like, he's got this horrific thing happening at home, but he's also out in the field, and we're seeing all his contributions.
Well, and the story of Tench's home life is a carryover from season 1 in terms of the relationship troubles, and him always being out of town, working a lot, and his son is developing into what looks like to be a little psychopath. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I could see that. I thought that depiction was interesting, and I imagine for people who want that kind of storyline in general, I'm guessing that it was a welcomed addition to the show. But yeah, I could see the point where it's just like, you know, Mindhunter, it's not really about a love story between different people, but you could argue that they're trying to string these out for however many seasons, and they wanted to give Wendy some home life, I think, you know, because with Holden, we're like, well, he doesn't have a home life. With Tench, we've depicted his home life. Well, what about Wendy's home life? And what Wendy's home life would be difficult because of homophobia and heterosexism.
And I'm okay with that, but show me her work life too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would have loved a scene like that. Like that didn't even occur to me until you just said that, where Wendy hits the books and she starts to talk with maybe some of her mentors or something who talk about personality and about motivation and about conceptualizing behavior in general. And then, she starts to piece things together and she maps everything out on a whiteboard. And she's like, okay, we have these people and the primary motivation is this, and for these people, but there's a Venn diagram that sort of overlaps everything, where it's like everyone is trying to they're all angry or some kind of thing that would bring it all together. And maybe they're headed towards that. Maybe if they did that season 2, they'd kind of blow their wad.
Could be. And I mean, the other thing is you could have a much more interesting struggle between Wendy and Holden in that vein, meaning instead of the whole like panic attack worry, imagine if she does start doing that, and then that causes some tension because some of her insights don't exactly align with some of Holden's intuitions, and Holden's character arc is learning that he's got to balance his intuitions with data, right? Like that would be interesting, something along those lines, right? But anyways, and yeah, maybe hopefully they do more of it in season 3.
So I just kind of go over some of my notes, then let's get to what we liked and disliked about the show overall. So also within the homophobia theme, they had the interview with Elmer Henley in prison, who was the assistant to Dean Corll, who murdered at least 28 teenage boys and young men between 1970 and 1973 in Houston, Texas. So you remember Elmer Henley?
Yeah.
So Elmer had killed Dean Corll, the ringleader of this killing, compatriot.
Yeah.
situation. And the reason why Elmer killed him was because Dean, the leader, was going to kill Elmer's friends. He was going to rape and kill Elmer's friends. And Elmer was like, and his friends were like, you're not going to let him rape and kill us, are you? Kind of a thing.
Right.
And then Elmer was like, okay. And then he shot him. He's still in prison, by the way. He's 63, interviewed on the show. And he adamantly denies being a faggot, quote unquote. Right. And young people today might not really be able to understand how important it was for people to not be quote unquote faggots back then. I mean, it's certainly something now, but my God, in 1980, it was a death sentence or something, and then during the FBI meeting about the helper, the Square agent basically says that gay people are prone to violence.
Yeah.
So, and Wendy says that homosexuality is relevant as it pertains to victim choice, but it's not causal to violence. And then the Square agent says homosexuality is a deviance. And then Wendy says, actually, it's been removed from the DSM as a disorder, and it's been changed to a sexual orientation disturbance. I mean, what an awful time.
Yeah.
What an awful time that it was recently a disorder.
Right.
And probably still considered that to be that way by many people. But it was technically a sexual orientation disturbance.
Right.
This was not that long ago, people.
Oh, again, growing up in the 80s with the DSM, I think my dad would have had the 3 at the time. So I don't know if that was the version that already had it removed or not. But I mean, my dad absolutely made it sound like that was not okay.
Yeah, I mean, in my tenure as a professor, I have had conversations with other professors, people who people looked up to, professors that were worshipped, professors who, I'm thinking of one professor in particular who was highly worshipped and considered to be one of the most woke professors that ever existed. He told me one time very adamantly that trans people are just confused. And I remember just being like, whoa, like, what? He was like, yeah, it's trans people, they're just confused and they're just going through a phase or something like that. Something like that. And I was like, whoa, so the notions can be held by, people that should know better. Anyway, so racism is another thing that they get into in season 2. And mainly around the Atlanta child murders committed allegedly or convictingly by Wayne Williams from 1979 to 1981. So it is within the span of this season, and at least 28 people in the Atlanta area were killed, mostly poor black boys. In the show and in real life, many of the families felt ignored by the police. Racism is bad now, but my God, in Atlanta in 1980, it wasn't that long after Jim Crow. It was just 12 or 14 years after Jim Crow had been made illegal.
Right.
I mean, there were all those mothers depicted in the show grew up in a Jim Crow South, where they had to use the colored bathroom and they had to sit in the colored section of a movie theater and all that kind of stuff.
By the way, this thing really grinds my gripes of wrath. A lot of people that are right now in the older generation, they I hear them talking about the glory days of the 50s, and this is ironic to me from two angles. One is, of course, it was glory days for them because they were in white suburbia, but number two, at the same time that they have no problem reminiscing from 70 years ago and going, 70 years ago, it was so great, and how come we can't have it like that? They can't understand why someone might have horrible memories from 10, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, let alone, and including 50. They can't get it. Like, they can remember 70 years ago being like, oh, it's so great, why can't we have it like that? But they can't understand why someone might still be a little salty that they or their mom or their grandma or their grandpa or someone they know had some horrible, traumatic, terrible, societally inflicted crime against them.
The thing that I always think about when I think about this so that I can empathize with other people and their experience is the older I get, the more angry I get about the fact that the American government locked up my family during World War II. When I was a kid, I knew about it for sure, but I felt like it was so long ago, and my relatives certainly weren't talking about it very much. But the older I get, I'm just like, it's fucking bullshit, Right. And I knew these people. They locked up people that I knew and were nice people. People that followed the law. People who paid their taxes, people born in the United States, people born to people who were born in the United States, locked up arbitrarily because of race, and imprisoned because of race. And, again, if my relatives were mean, it still wouldn't be okay, but it would sting less. My Japanese people in my family are some of the nicest, most law-abiding, church-going, kind, giving.
Like, you're quite possibly the most horrible member of your family.
Yeah. And grandmas.
Yeah.
65-year-old, my 65-year-old great-grandma, my 65-year-old great-grandfather who was frail and old, and he barely spoke English. He was born, in Japan, and he worked he dedicated all of his free time to helping the garden at a new church that he was a part of.
Yeah.
And was selfless and never complained, and locked him up.
Yeah.
Without any questions. And white people just fucking let it happen, and they signed the bills, and they did shit. And it's just like, you think I'm a little salty about that?
Yeah. Get over it, man. It's in the past.
So imagine, all of my relatives being enslaved and killed and beaten and whipped and lynched and treated like shit and made to drink out of other fountains and not allowed in your schools and oppressed in very systematic ways, signed bills and all the other white people looking the other way. Like, yeah, I think it makes sense to be a little salty. Anyway, so they show that the police in Atlanta, the white police, they go to them, the FBI goes to them, it's like, I think there's a connection here. And the white police officers are like, well, so tell me what you think about this depiction. Because on one level, the police are like bringing the logical kind of argument against that of just like, there's no MO. Sometimes they're strangled, sometimes they're shot. Sometimes they're dumped over here, and sometimes they're not. And there's murders that happen. We're a large city. It's Atlanta. A lot of people get murdered all the time, and sometimes they're kids. Just because they're kids doesn't mean that there's a connection, which is a logical thing to say, actually, because in Seattle, there's probably been a dozen unsolved murders in the past few months. Just because they're unsolved doesn't mean that they're done by the same person. And it doesn't fit the profile of a serial killer because it doesn't have those telltale signs of a modus operandi. So the cop is saying that, and then the cop also says, I get, that these women are upset. I care about them. This is a white cop saying, I care about the African-American community. And, they've been treated like crap because this is Atlanta. So I get why they distrust us, but I have to say, I don't know what's going on. So in other words, they very sympathetically portray the white cops as being logical and caring and compassionate, but at the same time drawing a conclusion that was believed to be somewhat natural. What'd you think about that depiction?
So I don't know how accurate it is, but I actually did think that the show did very well in being very nuanced because, you could imagine a simpler show, several things about it, especially if it wasn't based on like real events and things. The hero white cop is convinced that it's actually this white supremacist dude killing a whole bunch of people. The local white yokel cops are like, no, it's them black people's killing their own, and I've seen it before. And then the white hero perseveres and saves the black community from the white man. And that's the story. And actually that happened all the time, I'm sure, or should have happened all the time, and it was terrible already. But here they're actually being very subtle because like our hero, Holden, who is a white guy, but also doesn't seem very racist at all. He is convinced that it is a black person, but not because at least we don't see any singles that it's like his bias. He just thinks like this is the pattern that I'm seeing, and this is the information I've seen from serial killers, and I don't think this would break that pattern. And yet the locals are more like, well, first of all, we don't really know if these are connected, like you said. But some of their theories are like, it's probably some white supremacist. It's like subverted. And a lot. So I saw a lot of subtlety. Like a lot of the usual by the book things you would expect are subverted, and in a way that feels organic. And that's one thing about the show in general that I like, which is it's not just all handed out in a platter easily. It's like, nothing's perfect. Things go unsolved sometimes. It's,
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I like that perspective. I wish they would have ratcheted up a little. So there were two problems that I had with the racism sort of storyline, I suppose. One is that they didn't depict enough of the KKK presence, the white supremacy presence. They didn't depict enough the white supremacy in the police force and the actual offenses and crimes that the police committed to black people. They also didn't depict the history, which I don't know how you do exactly. I mean, they just could have given it more sort of talk or something, because like there's this one scene when the black people are in a church.
Yeah, and they're all losing their shit because even their own black representative, they're no longer believing him.
Right. And the way they depict it, they make the crowd look illogical. You know, they make the crowd look like they're a hysterical mass. Now, the politician doesn't look good either, but they kind of portrayed the people as, because what were they were saying, they were convinced it was a white supremacist, right?
Yeah.
And which is wrong according to the
But
storyline.
completely fair from.
But they seem hysterical to me.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't quite get the same sense because they were reacting to a bomb that went off or some explosion that went off that killed them, and that was coupled on top of all the kids disappearing.
Right.
So from
the investigators and the politician is like, there's no reason to believe these things are connected to the deaths of the kids. And there's a lot of reason to believe that this explosion was accidental.
Yeah.
And the people are standing up and they're like, no, it wasn't. You're ridiculous. You know, they're not like, let's look into it. They're like, you're wrong. It was the KKK. They blew up the thing. They killed our kids. To me, it looked like the show was trying to portray the crowd as being hysterical.
Okay, so to me, it looks like the show is trying to portray the crowd as a typical crowd, which are generally rushed to the conclusions and hysterical. Okay. And I could relate to it because I'm like, I would have probably been yelling the same things in that crowd.
But that's probably because you understand where these people are coming from.
Yeah.
Because the way the show lays out, it's like, oh, there's this explosion.
Yeah.
And there's no question that it was on purpose. You know, it seems like it's pretty obvious, like that it was accidental. These things happen. What they didn't show to people that don't really understand the backstory of this community is the police brutality, one.
And the actual explosions and bombs in churches and all this stuff.
Right, the things that actually happened that, and without that background, which most white Americans don't have, then it just makes them look like a crazed mass of people.
Okay, I could see how for the benefit of the majority of the viewers, it could. But yeah, I didn't. I know that Holden says, they're just being irrational or whatever he says. But as a viewer, I took it like, well, sure, but that's not without reason. But your point is like.
But if I was an African American who grew up in Atlanta and I knew and I was old enough to know the actual terror that white people, some of them were inflicting upon the people of that community, I'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, it's like, imagine after 9/11, like in October, another plane crashes into a building.
Right.
And people are like, oh, it's not connected. And it's like, oh, and the pilot was from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It's like, oh, they're not connected. You'd be like, are you fucking kidding me?
That was just an accident.
Yeah, it was just an accident.
Accidents do happen.
Yeah. We haven't looked into it that much, but we're fairly convinced. Everyone be like, are you, stupid?
Right.
Like,
well, you don't even have to reach past what actually happened in 9/11 because a lot of us were extremely suspicious about what actually happened.
Yeah.
Because our government had lied to us about so many things. And they were like, well, this is highly convenient. So it's like the masses already do jump to conclusions when it seems like there's a pattern about something.
Based on history, I wasn't suspicious at all. I was never.
I think there was a lot of us. There were a lot of us that initially weren't. Like when the thing happened, I was just like horrified. I hadn't even thought about it. But once the whole Iraq stuff started, myself included, a lot of us were like, wait a minute.
Yeah, not me.
So I'm curious. What do you just generally have a lot of faith in government or something? Or
I to believe that they could pull this off has a lot of faith in the government.
Oh, pull what off?
Pull off like a conspiracy like that.
Oh, no, not necessarily. But like, just the fact that like, clearly they used the event for a totally unrelated thing.
Yeah,
that's already a conspiracy.
No,
of course it is.
That's using.
They had someone literally lie to the UN, completely with made up evidence.
Yeah,
That's a conspiracy.
Yeah, but that's not connected to 9/11.
Well, it doesn't mean that they had the planes purposely crash into the thing.
But that's what you were basically intimating, unless I'm misunderstanding.
That was, some people went to that extent for sure.
Which I never did.
Well, fine, but what I'm trying to, two things I'm trying to point out. It didn't even require another event to happen. Already, like, why did WT7 fall? All these things, and even if people like me that didn't go to that extreme. We were actually right to be concerned that the government was not being on the up and up, because guess what? The whole war was based on a lie.
After 9/11.
But based on the lie that was caused by Iraq.
Yeah.
That was all a lie.
Yeah.
So,
but I never believed that lie either. I never believed that.
Well, sure, but then how could we not expect that people seeing that, oh, the government lied about this, why should they trust anything else?
Yeah.
And we still don't know who killed JFK and blah, blah. So, like, it's not surprising that people jump to conclusions.
Totally. Yeah. Especially in certain communities who are more lied to than others. So, yeah, I wish they would have given that backstory. I wish they would have depicted a little bit more of the actual racism that was still absolutely in existence in Atlanta, in the police force. But I also did like the fact, like you said, that they did present a nuanced point of view, which is usually reality. It's not inconceivable to think that you would have a white cop in Atlanta who would look at the data and say, I don't really see a connection here. Right. In the same way that Tench didn't see a connection. And also say, but I understand why they think there's a connection, because white cops, we have, believe me, there's KKK members that are in my police force, and and I hate it. Yeah. So I get why the black community is paranoid about our conclusions, because we haven't had a good track record. The fact that they would have a character like that is I like, but I think you have to
earn it a little bit more.
Yeah, because if you're not aware of the context and you just watch the show, you'd be like, I could see someone walking away going like, wow, black people in Atlanta back then were like hysterical, and they weren't logical. They weren't, they were overly dramatic about things, and it's like, so anyway.
Yeah.
Now let's get to actual Wayne Williams. Do you know much about his story, the guy who was convicted of the murders in Atlanta?
Nope.
So I don't know much about it either, but the little bit that I did read about was that the evidence that connected him to the murders was extremely tenuous.
Yeah.
It's all circumstantial. Mm-hmm. And although it looks bad, and the TV show really shows you like it must be him.
Yeah.
It's quite possible to other people that it wasn't him.
But it'd be like the whole Adnan Syed. So many of the suspects, like there was, circumstantial evidence that looked really bad
for other suspects.
For other suspects,
right? So the fact that and you could see why the community and the prosecutors would want to really like find someone and blame it on one person, so that the community would calm down. But even if he did kill the two people that he was convicted of, I think it was mainly just a he certainly wasn't. There certainly wasn't a lot of evidence that he had killed all 28.
Right.
But that was the story that the police force and the politicians wanted to paint after that, because they wanted to move on from that. So so there's a lot of compelling theories, and similarly with the Adnan Syed case, of like there absolutely are other suspects that they could have looked at. It could have actually been the KKK.
Did it actually stop after that?
Yes, from what I understand. Well, again, it's not like kids being killed didn't stop.
Right,
but seemingly. The other thing was there could have been more than one killer. I mean, to me, that was one of the things that seemed to stick out to me, was that you could have absolutely had like 10 different individual killings. Like one killing could have been like the father killed the kid. I mean, that happens sometimes. Another killing could have been a friend had killed the kid. Another killing could have been like a gang member killed the kid. Another killing could have been a KKK member. Another person could have been, there could have been multiple sexual sadists who were murdering people at the time. And when you look at this case, it's there's a lot of holes. I should just say. So, but in the show, they didn't really depict that. You know what I mean? I really liked the way they portrayed the mother's distrust of Holden and that relationship between Holden and that main mother. And her glasses were just classic 1980. You know, just those giant plasticky glasses. I was just like, it's so good. But with her, you really got the sense of the pain and betrayal for, generations of being treated terribly. The one scene that I just laughed out loud at was, Holden's finally getting some inroads with her, and she's finally like kind of warming up slightly to him, because he's proven that he's dedicated, and he's been dedicated to this case, and he's managed to get the FBI to the town and a task force and da-da-da. And, she's being a little bit warm, and she's like, go ahead and, grab some
a cornbread. Yeah, I thought you were going to bring that up. I thought the same thing. Grab a cornbread.
Then he grabs the cornbread. That'll be $1.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious.
I was like, I'll offer you the cornbread, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Still got to give us the $1. I loved it.
Okay, let's look at Tench's kid, Brian, adopted age 3. So he, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but he watched older boys kill an infant.
Yeah.
And he was just there.
He was there, and then he convinced them to put him on a cross.
Right. So then,
supposedly so that he could come back to life.
Right. So Brian was like, well, if we put him on a cross, he'll come back to life.
How old is he again?
He's
5?
No, he's probably like 8 or something. I'm sure. I think. So there was a similar incident that this probably was inspired by. San Francisco, 1971. 2 brothers, 7 and 10, were frustrated with a toddler because he wouldn't stop crying. They were hitting him, and they killed him with a brick. They hit him in the head with a brick, and then they wanted to resurrect him, so they put him on a cross.
Ugh.
And so, similar, case that they seem to be pulling from. Brian seems to be regressing from the trauma. He's wetting his bed, which is common to kids in trauma. He's playing with younger children's toys. He's sucking his thumb. And then we go to therapy, which is terrible. Again, it's normal for TV and movies to depict therapy in this really terrible way. And it's possible that a therapist like this could have existed back then. But come on, writers, like throw us a bone here.
Yeah.
Like, does every clinician have to suck ass?
Yeah.
Like, yes, there are suck ass clinicians out there.
And essentially, the sense I got from both that clinician as well as the social worker is they're the pencil dick, or the ones from Ghostbusters, the EPA agent from Ghostbusters.
I mean, it's possible, but not common, especially now the physician who says, I could send you down the hall to look at ink blots. That's a little bit more believable to me based on what I understand 1980 to be like. But this is just like such a bad depiction of therapy. Is it possible? Yeah, but come on, people. First off, the therapist is grilling Brian to tell all about the trauma during a session with the parents present. And of course, Brian doesn't say anything because she's being a complete asshole to him.
Right.
She's not being warm. She's like, now tell us the story. I mean, non-clinicians understand that's not how you get someone to talk.
Right.
The therapist is super aloof and combative with Brian and the parents. Like, she's the worst therapist that ever existed. Very judgmental questions. When in a classic sort of depiction of terrible therapy, when something happens, she scribbles something. In her
They
notes.
did that constantly, and then like both with the social worker and the therapist and everything. It's like, what are you writing there? It's like in a comedy movie, like what are you writing there?
Yeah. She gives a medication for bedwetting, desmopressin, which is a medication that it just decreases urine, so that you don't have to pee at night. That's all. That's all it does. She doesn't say maybe you should try not drinking water before you go to bed. She doesn't say it's okay to wet your bed. Obviously you have no control over wetting your bed.
So it's not a therapist for the kid. It's like the state's inquisitor.
But for what purpose?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? She tells the parents to punish Brian for wetting the bed, which was common back then and a terrible practice. But I don't know if a therapist would have said that, honestly, but maybe. And then the mom steps forward and says, maybe he's wetting the bed because he has therapists making him, relive the experience. And he has social workers coming to a school to observe him. And I was just like, yes. Thank you, Mom, for pointing out something that should be said. And yeah, but still, as a clinician, I'm just tired. It'd be like, are there Asians who say "aso"? Sure.
Yes.
There might be some Asians who have a word in their language that sounds like "aso."
I mean, you greet me that way every time, but
yeah, is that something that's possible? But if that's all you saw was Asians walking around in movies going "aso,"
which is what we saw a lot in the 80s.
Right. And it's like, let's get off of this.
Yeah.
Yes, there are some bad therapists out there, but most are at least average. An average therapist is better than this therapist. All right, let's go into what we like about this season. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, so I very much enjoyed the mystery of it, and I definitely like the ominous nature of them showing us, even from season 1, showing us the BTK developing. He's getting a little more elaborate, and those scenes are very economical. These very short little scenes, but they show us, and it's so scary to watch. Like that one scene that you would think, if you saw it out of context, is like so meaningless. He's taking the photocopies, and the thing's stuck or whatever, and he's trying to get the paper out, and then he finally kind of wrestles the paper because the one dude helps him, and he's got the little symbol he's developing, and it's like, oh God, that's so creepy, So I really like that sequence. I haven't seen the 9th episode, so maybe let's try not to spoil anything super spoilable, but I also really liked, I liked the whole story in Atlanta because in the first season, it was all like white people's problems, like these white killers killing white people and stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, right. Other communities are affected by this horrible kind of violence too. And it was a lot more subtlety there. Like I was saying, there was a lot more interactions that were interesting. I really liked Tench's problems. At first I was a little frustrated because part of my feeling was, and I do actually feel this way. I'm like, oh, okay, I see. So coincidentally, the child of the main investigator in these serial killers might become a serial killer.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
So I didn't like that convenience. But what I did like was the relationship between him and his wife, like those tensions, the depictions of how difficult it would be if someone you love was involved in something so horrific. The difficulty in him balancing his professional life and his home life and not wanting to tell his colleagues, that most of them anyways. And I like his character. I think as an actor, he's really effective because he has that balance of like, look, I'm just trying to be practical here. He's not maybe as smart as Holden, but he's got a lot of kind of good intuition about how to relate to people. That scene is brilliant when he's at the party. And he's not a party guy, but he knows how to tell the right stories. He's got
I thought that was a brilliant, even though it's kind of minor, expansion of his character. I mean, because if you just said, okay, from season 1, is Tench the sort of guy that would entertain a crowd at a work party? You'd be like, no, he's a tough guy. He's a man's man. But that's because those are stereotypes that we have of certain character types, that are portrayed in movies and TV and books. In real life, people have a lot of sides to themselves. Yeah. And Tench has this side to himself where he's a bit extroverted and a bit narcissistic in a crowd. He's like, give me the microphone. I know how to talk.
And I got the sense that like in his rookie years, his early years, that was probably his role within his friend group at work, right? He was the guy. It was like after work, go to the bar, and he's telling the stories, and everyone's kind of gathering around him. But then over the years, the workforce kind of grinds him down a bit, and so you don't see as much of that. But when he gets a chance, it comes out.
Did you know that Tench is a heartthrob at this point?
What?
Like a lot of women are getting real hot and bothered.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
Whoa.
There's a whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, and they asked him about it. Like, did you expect that you'd become a heartthrob?
Are you shipping with Tench or whatever?
Well, it's
Tench
just
shippers.
I think it's just a lot because he's a man's man.
Yeah.
That's attractive to some people. He seems strong.
He's having marital troubles.
Yeah.
He might be available.
Yeah. So, and everyone likes someone in a uniform.
Right.
So anyway, now I want to get back to BTK. Do you know how the BTK story, the true story?
Not much. I know that he was very much into himself, like a lot of these folk are, and wanted the world and the press to know, like, that he was kind of in control and that what he did and all these things.
Yeah.
I know the guy they cast looks uncannily like him.
That's one thing about this show that's amazing. The Charles Manson actor, I mean, to find someone that looks like the character and then to find someone that can act like the character has got to be like only one person on the planet.
I should win an Emmy for casting for sure.
The Ed Kemper actor actually got an Emmy last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's
well deserved.
Yeah, and so that's something that's just amazing. Like when you look at the side by side of some of these people, you're just like, whoa.
So, but I don't.
So let me tell you a story about BTK because it actually, I'm curious if they'll ever resolve this. I think they will. But what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to fast forward to like 2005 because that's when he was caught. So BTK killed 10 people at least between 1974 and 1991. And so it was 10 people. So the reason why he was such a big deal was because he involved the media a lot. The Atlanta killers is 28 people. And the guy who, the Coral guy who killed all those young people, it was 28 plus people. But because there wasn't media involvement, we don't remember it as much.
And it's probably why he wasn't caught sooner, right? Because when you're a Ted Bundy and you're racking up the bodies and uncontrollably killing more.
Just wandering into a house and like randomly killing a bunch of people. BTK is seemingly a psychopath and a sexual sadist. Obviously has no remorse or empathy, and he really got off by killing people and raping people. He apparently stopped killing in 1991, which is a long time after season 2, right? But he kept trying to get attention years later by sending stuff into the press and the police. So even though he stopped killing, he kept like, I'm tricking you.
Oh, I see.
And from Wikipedia, they say 2005. So this is like not that long ago, right? In his letters to the police, Rader, that was BTK, asked if his writings, if put on a floppy disk, could be traced or not. So like, if a small 3.5-inch floppy disk, he's like,
Jeez.
so if I put a Word doc on a floppy disk and send it into you, because I'm always trying to communicate with you, and I don't know why maybe he thought it'd be easier, and he asked the police, could you trace it? And the police answered his question in a newspaper ad. They answered his question in a newspaper ad, posted in the Wichita Eagle saying it would be safe to use the disc.
By the way, was he just stupid then?
Yeah, so that's the thing I want to point out is like, they're not all Hannibal Lecter.
No.
Like, they rarely are, in fact.
Yeah.
They're often...
It's like Kemper might have been.
Psychopaths are, one, not necessarily geniuses. Two, even if they are, they're usually quite impulsive.
Yeah.
If you're a sexual sadist, you're compulsive about the act.
Yeah.
Like very smart people can have very difficult compulsions of alcoholism, cigarettes. Very smart people smoke cigarettes,
Yeah.
even though they know they shouldn't. So being smart doesn't mean you don't do self-destructive things. So he sent a floppy disk to a TV station in Wichita. The police got a hold of it, and they found metadata embedded.
Of course. Dude.
Embedded in a deleted Word doc.
Oh my God.
The metadata contained the words Christ Lutheran Church, and the document was marked as last modified by someone named Dennis. So they just had to go to Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita and say, is anyone named Dennis here? And they're like, yeah, Dennis Rader. And then DNA evidence.
This is so unbelievable. I had no idea. That has got to be like, those agents must have been laughing their asses off.
Well, but the FBI had been trying to find this guy for a long time.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then to just have this random stupid mistake well after he had stopped killing people, long after he'd gotten away with it all.
What was he thinking they were going to say? Oh no, if you send us that, we would be able to look at metadata. Like, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Maybe he wanted to be caught,
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know. I just have the people, including myself, are not always smart. We make bad choices.
Of course.
On a daily basis, and serial killers are no different. But we think of serial killers as like, well, if you got away with it for so long, you must be really meticulous.
Right.
You must, dot all your I's and cross all your T's. No one does that, and people make mistakes, and that's why whenever they point to 9/11 was an inside job, it's just like, so you're telling me that of the thousands of people who were involved in that conspiracy you claim, none of them made a mistake.
Right.
Or dozens of them didn't make mistakes that point towards that as being a conspiracy.
No, so the kind of thing you have to have for a conspiracy, which is why I was bringing up that the example of the government lying, is to your point. First of all, the more people you involve, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
But
even one person.
But the catch is that it needs to be sort of in your wheelhouse, if I will. So in the case of these murderers, what I'm surprised about, and this is why I'm wondering if he just wanted to get caught, is like, he certainly didn't need to keep communicating, but obviously he did.
Right, he was compelled.
Right? And so that overrode whatever sense of danger there might have been.
Right.
Also, they might not feel sense of danger that much anyways because they're psychopaths, right? So they might not have that sense of
right.
Oh, but what if I get caught?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, most of us are cringing at the idea of jaywalking in front of a police officer.
Yeah.
And to do this, you have to have a very low, a very high threshold for danger.
Yeah.
The other things I liked about the show, just to wrap up here, Fincher's camera and mood is always pleasant and specific. It's like a dream the entire time. I loved the attention to details with the interviews with the serial killers. Very good representation as far as I can tell of the different killers. It's really hard to do that in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Having said that, they allowed, there were scenes like the scene where they're interviewing people. You think, oh yeah, that was just one scene. It's like 20 minutes of the episode.
Yeah.
They really let it breathe.
Yeah.
And another writer would be like, this is too slow. We got to keep it moving. We got to we need more action. We need more shootouts and Holden having a panic attack. We can't just be sitting there talking for 20 minutes.
And by the way, as convenient as it was, I really actually liked the scene where Manson is looking at them and going like, these are your children. They did what they did. And we know what the Tench is going through.
I like the new boss because the first season, the boss was such a cliche.
Oh, yeah.
He was constantly, yelling at his underlings and, I'm going to fire you. And it's just like, come on. I mean,
damn it, Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
If you step out of line one last time.
I'm too old for this shit. And, maybe it was accurate, but I like this new boss because, again, a character that is not usually represented, but absolutely exists. He's a political person. He's like, what is going to please the people in power? And it's trendy right now to do this. And so, let's go in that direction. Tench's wife, I liked her character halfway because she isn't the classic trope of a nagging wife in season two, where it'd be very tropey to have her just be like, you're out, you're never home. Yeah. And she's often in season 2, she's just like, I kind of need you to be home. Yeah. But I'm a strong person. And, but there are elements. So I liked her character halfway. The other half I didn't like because it did kind of have some of those elements. But again, maybe it's accurate.
I did really like that scene. I mean, it was heartbreaking, but when she's saying, and I was giving him a bath, and then the thought that came to my head was that he's not mine.
Right.
I did nothing wrong. And it was such a heartbreaking, horrible thought for her to have.
Yeah.
But it felt like, oh, I bet you someone could have that thought.
Right. And I've treated families like this. I've treated families with young kids and teenagers who exhibited psychopathic and sadistic behavior. I worked with one family once who had a kid, similar, adopted. So Brian was adopted 3 years in. So we could assume that Brian, the kid, went through a tough time attachment-wise in the first years of life, which is common to a lot of people with troubles and common to a lot of serial killers. Now, to be clear, 99.999% of people with attachment injuries and adoption issues early in life do not become serial killers and don't murder anybody. But
many of the serial killers we know about were not adopted.
Right.
Yeah.
But all of them, aside from maybe a couple exceptions, have strong evidence of massive attachment.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Injuries.
I'm just saying that adoption is not a prerequisite for...
Right. Yeah. But being adopted at 3, more likelihood of attachment issues. Yeah. And where was I going with that?
Oh, that, basically you've treated families where they had...
So I had this one family who had a kid who they had adopted, and they were saints for adopting this kid. And they were really worried now because the kid was like, he would wake up in the middle of the night and move stuff around to like freak him out. He would enter their room and like stare over them to like scare them and stuff. Oh. He would, when the parents weren't looking, he would, pick up anything he could and throw it at his younger sibling, who was a biological kid to the parents. He, liked knives, and he's like 7 years old. And what do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's your kid. So they live with you. You feed them, you have to love them, and you're just like, there's a monster living in my house.
Right.
And it's not like the kid is just temporarily acting out, or it's just a matter of loving the kid, because if you give the kid love, they'll stop doing this. It's not like that.
It's like a constant pattern.
Yeah. You've voluntarily added a human monster into your family who can harm not only you, but obviously your other kids.
Oh, no. Oh.
And it's a very, very difficult situation, Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
I really liked in the show how they showed how everyone was really fascinated with the stories that Tench was saying.
Yeah.
I think
which they would be. Yeah. Think about it, right? I mean, we're fascinated. We're talking about the show.
I think they're making fun of the audience.
I could see that. Absolutely. Yeah, we are those cops.
We're those douchebags going, tell me more.
Tell me more.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know exactly what they're trying to say. I think, this show is subtle enough that I could see them, I don't know if they're saying anything with that, but I could also see them saying, look, people, because I'm guessing that the writers in the off season, there was a lot of think pieces on like, why are we even watching stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe the writers came to this conclusion. It's just like, well, we just have a thing about this sort of thing. Yeah. Like Fincher also made Zodiac, which is basically Mindhunter in a movie form.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing Fincher is well aware of the weird phenomenon that people are just, the biggest podcasts are about crime.
Yeah. He made 7.
All right. So I also liked how they showed how boring good police work is. There's no shootouts. There's lots of meetings.
Right. Or my favorite sequence actually for that angle was when he's trying to get them to send out papers to recruit, and then the one cop's like, well, all right, cool. What's your PO number? What? And then he gives him all this red tape. And then when he jumps through all the hoops, he's like, well, there's no way we can do it now.
Yeah.
It's like too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Just stuff like that. I mean, that's what being a police officer, it's not running in an alley and shooting guns. It's paperwork. It's meetings. Right. It's gathering the data. It's consulting with other people,
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't like was, or what didn't you like? Did you mention all of
I
them?
mentioned, so first of all, I did not like the story arc for the doctor, the therapist, the psychologist.
She's a doctor.
The doctor psychologist.
Just like I'm a doctor.
Yeah, sorry. So because, what's her name? I keep forgetting.
Wendy Carr.
Wendy. Not because I have a problem with her being a lesbian or I have a problem with them showing her personal life and stuff. Just because I thought that her potential was wasted this season. I wanted to see her. There was one moment where she came to shine, which was that interview. But in a way, it was kind of like, oh, right, because she's a lesbian, she can relate. But I realized, no, well, how is she a great psychologist? And in fact, well, don't show me that because she's a good character in the show, she can do what Holden can do. Now, Holden is Holden. What can she do? And as we do this podcast, I was very interested in seeing the field of psychology develop in parallel with the field of FBI agency. And so that was disappointing to me. Another thing that I thought was there are some moments in the show that lag. And the thing is, in a movie, if I'm watching a movie and it's got a couple of slow moments in Fincher style, it probably would have been fine because it's just these little mood moments. But because these are like hour-long episodes, there are parts where I'm like, oh, okay, just get back to the main story a little bit. And I felt more than once that feeling. And maybe I was being a little impatient because I was trying to finish the episodes, but I did feel that way. The other thing that I didn't like, sorry. The other thing that I didn't like was when in the first season, I did get a feeling like we had an arc for Holden that was like, all right, he's got some interesting ideas, but like he's really rough around the edges. But then he's going to be allowed to come in and shine, and he did, and he had some great insights, and that led to something. Where I thought that was going to happen this new season was he was going to really struggle with the post-traumatic or panic or whatever from his experience with what's his name? But then they really did drop that after 2 episodes. And so I was like a little disappointed about that.
Yeah. But it was probably better writing to do that.
It might be, but then don't introduce it. And instead, I guess a different way to think about what annoyed me a little bit is they almost made him too perfect now, too on the money.
Right.
So
yeah, I didn't like that either.
Yeah.
That's like the House Sherlock thing of this trope that our hero can see through the matrix instantly, and no one's like that. The things I didn't like are the following. All the green tint is getting ridiculous. It needs to be dialed back by at least 50%.
Add a little red in there.
I mean, Fincher, it's like, I get it. You like the green tint. It provides a mood for you, but it's ridiculous. The sound editing in some parts were horrific.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the dialogue, when they're in the bar, for example, there's other examples too. The dialogue is way too quiet. The ambiance is way too loud. It was the same in season 1, and it's a problem with Fincher's style in general.
I wonder if I didn't experience it as much because I was listening through headphones on my phone.
Maybe. But there were times when I was watching the show where I was like, I can't even hear what they're saying.
Okay.
I didn't like the fact that Holden is always right, because that's just kind of silly.
And not only that he's always right, there's no arc to how he became right.
Right.
That would have been okay.
He figures it out.
Struggling, but he's got an insight, and sure, maybe it's a little more Hollywood, but give me something to work with.
Yeah.
Instead of you're right. I walk in, it's like, oh, your leg's broken.
Right.
Yeah.
If he said, based on our experience,
Yeah.
people tend to kill within their own race.
Yeah.
But our science is pretty young at this point, so we don't really know.
Yeah.
But based on that, I'm speculating
Yeah.
that it's an African American killer.
Right.
But I don't know. We need more data, and obviously it could be anybody because it could be, it could be a dog for all we know. It does, but
right.
he doesn't say that. What he says is it's a black person.
It also undermines what one would think would be one of the premises of the show, which is that this is how the field started developing. Unless the premise of the show is there is no field, you need super insightful one-offs, and if you don't get lucky that that's the agent working, you're not going to catch these people. Right. And maybe that's what their point is.
There was, I assume, have you got to the scene where he's carrying the cross?
Yeah.
That was a very weird scene to me.
Very weird. I didn't get it.
I didn't get it at all. I'm glad you didn't get it.
I thought, so I'm glad that you didn't get it, because I'm like, oh man, I must be rushing through these because I don't understand what's happening.
No, I had no, okay, he's trying to get the cross to the thing because it'll be a commemorative thing that the killer will want to go back to.
Right, because I thought that was the whole point. It's like they're trying to see if he comes back to things.
Right.
But instead of focusing on like the march and seeing who he sees, he's focusing on rushing to get this cross. What's the cross going to do?
Right. Like you could get the cross there 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Two, the crowd was depicted like a bunch of zombies.
Yeah.
Like the way if you just drop that scene into it, you just
the zombies are coming.
It looks like zombies are coming.
Yeah.
And the super like
you're right. It's like he's trying to put a barrier up before the zombies are
right. And then the fact that he's carrying the cross. Holden is carrying the cross.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. The whole scene, I was like 3 minutes in, I'm like, wait, have I missed something? And I even went back and I was like, no, this scene is just, I think it was directed by, because there's been Fincher only directed like some of the episodes. I think whoever directed that episode didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah. That could be because...
Or they're a zombie like enthusiast or something.
That could be because I, for a second, thought, oh, wait, was this part of the whole trying to see if it's a white supremacist? Are they going to like burn this cross? Like, what are we doing with the crosses? Like,
yeah. Why is it so important?
Yeah.
And two, why are we depicting everyone? And then he finally gets the cross up, and then the marchers look at Holden and they stare at each other, and then the scene just ends.
That's the end of the scene.
And you're like...
And no one looks for any killers anywhere.
They never talk about it again.
Yeah.
It was just... I thought it was just...
And they almost look at him because like it looks like they're pissed at him.
Right. And I'm like, why are you pissed? He put up a cross. Like, in a normal situation, you'd be like, oh, that guy really wants to get that cross up. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
I agree.
And what I thought was going to happen was that the cross was going to fall over or something, and then everyone was going to think, because they didn't know he was an FBI agent, I thought they were going to think he was a KKK person. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, see, yeah, and anyways, a lot of things went through my mind trying to make sense of it, including, which would have made no sense, when he's trying to adjust the cross, or like, I thought he was pulling out like a cigarette to light it or something. I mean, granted, it makes even less sense, but I was so lost that I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
The stilted dialogue that Fincher prefers is both a good thing and a bad thing. In some ways, it's very economical. They get points across very quickly. But again, it's so dead. I mean, there is no life in this dialogue. Again, with the green, dial that back 50%. It's supposed to be 1980, which was mostly accurate, like Wendy's condo, like the stripes on the side of on in the interior. My dad created those stripes because my dad's an artist. He's not like an artist; he is an artist, and he that's what he did when we moved into our house in the 70s, but by the time it was around 1980, he had created all of those stripes, and it's a very specific look, and it probably only existed for a few years, and also the color palette has to be very specific because it's never primary colors. It's like interesting shades of different colors, and that really brought me back.
So I had a moment there where it was actually, I got a little emotional. Remember when Tench takes his son to ice cream? And then, do you remember the song that was playing?
No.
Arthur's theme.
Oh.
Once in a life you find. I all of a sudden was brought back to New York with my dad because, and going to ice cream in New York, because that song was popular right then when I was living in New York, and my dad really liked that song.
It's a great song.
And we were in New York, and it's about getting lost in New York City, and I remember going to get ice cream with my dad, and something about the ominousness of what he was trying to deal with his son, and the ominous feelings I would feel in New York, probably as a result of all of the above happening at the time with me and everything, and it was more dangerous in New York. So it's really, for a second, I was like taken back, and at first I kind of had a smile, and then I got like these really sad feelings, and like it was weird.
One thing though that I thought was a little non-1980 was in the Tench's bedroom, they had a VCR and a TV in the bedroom.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, which I was like, one, most people in 1980 didn't have VCRs.
Right.
Two, to have a TV in the bedroom was really weird. I mean, now obviously everyone has a TV in the bedroom, or most people do.
Right.
But in the 80s, usually people had even rich people just had just one TV.
Especially a cop, like an FBI cop.
Right. So I don't know. It's just again, most people, it doesn't matter to them, but to me, like,
that seems anachronistic.
1980, like 1995.
Also, wouldn't beta have been a thing first?
It might have even been a beta. I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah.
And I also, again, didn't like the fact that Tench's kid was involved in a murder. And some level it was kind of cool. Another level it's pretty cheesy, particularly the scene where he's staring at the girl in the playground, and he has that real classic movie trope where he's like, looking like an evil person at the girl. I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they're going with this. Like, are they saying he's developing into a killer, or is he just going through a tough time? Because anyway,
it's too convenient. It's like, wow, you're the lead FBI of the new agency or the new task force investigating serial killers, and your son might be a serial killer.
Yeah, it's like, come on. On Facebook, I asked people what they thought of it. Famous patron Lennon said that he liked that they moved the season to be around Tench more. He said, I think they showed quite well how he is a decent, compassionate, well-balanced guy operating in a very difficult circumstance, and how his wife is severely punished by the roles of the time.
Yeah.
He says the portrayal of the political backdrop was great, and despite it all, they didn't make the local police mere hick stereotypes. Blah, blah, blah. The relationship of Wendy Carr was done quite well in terms of complexity and how it ended, though I thought the initial seduction was a bit stilted and didn't ring completely true to me.
I could see that.
There's something of a deflation of ego of Ford, Holden, compared to the last season, despite all support. Blah, blah. It's not all about one genius. So FBL gives it a thumbs up, it looks like. Patron Tasha says that she really liked it. I was wondering how they would present the Atlanta child murders, and they seemed to have a pretty fair approach that showed the politics and the attitudes of the time. They gave the mothers a voice that they never got during the actual murders. Final thoughts, bro.
Well, one thing that I wish to see more of, and I don't know if it's going to happen, but in this season or next season, because I only have one episode left, so it's not going to happen this season. So there were a couple scenes where they briefly mentioned all these other serial killers. Ted Bundy was mentioned. They mentioned didn't they mention the Zodiac killer? Right, yeah, because they said, oh, just like the Zodiac killer, blah, blah, blah. And I all of a sudden got this sense, because, when I first was watching the first season, I felt like at the start, like, oh, they're just figuring out that there's these people doing these things. But here it feels like, oh, this stuff is happening now all the time, and there are all these things. And I yet haven't really understood what is the stuff they're formalizing, other than the random comments that Holden throws out. Like, oh yeah, they mostly have consistent this or that. Like, I want more scenes with the science of it, like where they discuss like the things that now they're pretty sure of. Show me more diagrams. Like, yeah, well, this is a pattern. Like those kinds of scenes.
Yeah, TED Talk.
Geekiness, TED Talks.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be good.
But overall, I like it, and I'm definitely going to watch the next season.
Me too. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there, and please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.